Tala Tonga joins Paul Heyman's new faction and shocks Roman Reigns backstage. The tribal war just got personal, and Roman Reigns didn't see this one coming. In this explosive WWE Raw moment, Tala Tonga officially aligns himself with Paul Heyman's new faction, sending shockwaves through the WWE universe. With Roman Reigns' return to Raw after months of silence, tensions are boiling over. Heyman's betrayal at WrestleMania is still fresh, and now he's recruited one of the most dangerous men in wrestling today. Will Roman Reigns strike back, or is the era of the tribal chief officially over? What if I told you the most loyal warriors aren't always the ones standing beside you? That sometimes, the knife in your back is held by the hand you once trusted the most? That's the reality Roman Reigns woke up to just days ago, when a quiet storm named Tala Tonga erupted onto WWE Raw, and aligned himself with the one man Reigns swore to never forgive, Paul Heyman. It wasn't a match. It wasn't a promo. It wasn't even part of the script. This was betrayal, detonated live in front of millions of viewers. But before we get to the moment the WWE Universe gasped in unison, we need to go back. Back to the silence. Back to the fallout. Back to the painful vacuum that formed the very second Roman Reigns walked out of WrestleMania, and didn't come back. For months, Roman Reigns was the sun around which all WWE storylines revolved. The undisputed champion. The tribal chief. The head of the table. But when the man holding the chessboard vanishes, every pawn, rook, and knight starts plotting their own endgame. The cracks in the bloodline didn't begin with Solo Sikoa's ambition or Jacob Fatu's rage. They didn't start with Jey Uso's emotional unraveling or Zilla Fatu's rise. They began in silence, in the space left behind when Reigns disappeared and Paul Heyman was left with nothing but his resentment, and a plan. And it's in that silence where Tala Tonga was waiting. He wasn't loud. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't even signed with WWE officially. But within the backstage corridors of wrestling's biggest empire, whispers had begun, Tala's coming. Some said he was looking for revenge. Others claimed he was ready to carve his own empire, far from his New Japan legacy. But what no one expected, not even Reigns himself, was that Tala Tonga would emerge not as an ally, but as a weapon forged by Heyman. The betrayal wasn't just loud. It was surgical. The crowd had barely processed the music drop, an unfamiliar tribal rhythm fused with heavy bass, when Tala appeared on the ramp, slow and deliberate, his eyes scanning the arena like a hunter entering the domain of his prey. But what truly set the arena ablaze was who stood beside him, Paul Heyman. Clutching his trademark phone. Smirking. Hands trembling not from fear, but anticipation. No words were spoken. None were needed. The visual alone sent shockwaves. And somewhere, in the shadows backstage, Roman Reigns watched it happen on a monitor. Jaw clenched. Eyes dead still. No one could hear what he said in that moment. But you could feel it, the war wasn't just coming, it had already started. To understand how seismic this betrayal is, you have to understand what Roman Reigns has been through since WrestleMania. Because this wasn't just any return. This wasn't just any Monday Night Raw. This was supposed to be the night the tribal chief made his statement, reclaimed his table, and reasserted his dominance. Instead, he got ambushed by destiny. After WrestleMania, Reigns vanished from television. WWE claimed it was planned time off. That he needed space. Time to recalibrate. To heal. But the truth, as insiders have now confirmed, was far more complex. According to leaked reports from inside Stamford, Reigns was emotionally rattled by Paul Heyman's betrayal. An act that didn't happen during a climactic main event, but backstage, behind the curtain, when Heyman refused to follow Reigns to the ring. Whispers say Reigns confronted him just seconds before his entrance music hit. That Heyman stared into the eyes of the man he helped build, and simply said, "Not this time." Since then, there had been no contact between them. Not through management. Not through family. Not even through text. Roman Reigns was done with Heyman. Or so he thought. Because the truth about Paul Heyman is this: he never leaves a throne empty. If he isn't standing behind it, he's busy building another one. And with Roman gone, he began assembling something darker. Something more dangerous. Something unpredictable. That something now has a name: Tala Tonga. If you followed wrestling beyond WWE, you know Tala Tonga isn't just a name. He's a warning. A force bred in the chaos of Japan's hardest-hitting promotions. A man whose loyalty was once etched into bulletproof alliances, until those alliances collapsed. In New Japan, he was the enforcer. The fixer. The storm you called when the rain wasn't enough. And now, he's in WWE, with Paul Heyman as his mouthpiece. It's a pairing no one predicted, and yet, in hindsight, it makes too much sense. Heyman is the cerebral architect. Tala is the fury in motion. Together, they're not just a faction. They're a declaration. And that declaration is simple: Roman Reigns no longer controls the narrative. When Tala walked through that curtain and stood beside Heyman, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was a warning to the WWE locker room, to the fans, to the entire Anoa'i bloodline. There is no more loyalty. Only power. Backstage cameras caught Roman in the hallway after the segment aired. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't flipping tables. He wasn't even speaking. But his hands were clenched so tightly, his knuckles were white. Jacob Fatu stood a few feet away, unsure of whether to approach. Zilla Fatu, normally the most vocal, stayed silent. A production assistant, completely unaware of what just went down, handed Roman a mic for a backstage segment that no longer mattered. Reigns took it, and then dropped it. Walked away. That's when the rumors began. That Reigns was done. That Tala had broken something inside him. That Paul Heyman, once again, had created something so personal, so surgical, that not even the most dominant champion in modern wrestling could recover. But that's the thing about Roman Reigns. He doesn't recover. He reloads. And that's where our story begins to twist. Because as shocking as Tala's debut was, it's what comes next that will define the future of WWE. Behind closed doors, a war is brewing. On one side, Roman Reigns, scarred, betrayed, and hell-bent on reclaiming control. On the other, Paul Heyman. Strategic, cold-blooded, and now armed with one of the most dangerous men in wrestling history. This isn't just about brand supremacy. Or family. Or legacy. This is about survival. And if you think you've seen the last betrayal, you haven't been paying attention. WrestleMania 41 was supposed to be the coronation. Not just another victory for Roman Reigns, but the confirmation of everything he built: the bloodline, the legacy, the myth. For over 3 years, he had stood atop the WWE mountain. A figure both feared and revered. No man had held power quite like him. Not Cena. Not Triple H. Not even The Rock. But the funny thing about power? It disappears fast when your foundation crumbles. And that's exactly what happened the night Paul Heyman walked away. It wasn't in the ring. It wasn't under the lights. It happened in the shadows, off camera, in the most sacred of places, guerrilla position. That space where strategy becomes performance. Where silence screams louder than pyro. And on that night, the silence was deafening. Roman was moments from his WrestleMania entrance. The music was cued. The lights were dimmed. The crowd was on fire. But something was missing. Paul Heyman, his right hand, his wise man, stood frozen. He didn't move. He didn't step out with him. And then, he turned and walked in the opposite direction. People backstage were stunned. No one had seen it coming. Not even Roman. And just like that, something broke. The match that followed, a brutal, emotionally charged war with Jey Uso, was still legendary. But if you looked closely, you saw it. A hesitation. A moment when Reigns looked around, and realized he was alone. And when the bell rang and Jay stood over him in victory, Roman Reigns didn't protest. He didn't argue. He didn't even try to stand back up. He laid there. Motionless. Broken not by a spear. Not by a superkick. But by betrayal. In the weeks that followed, WWE social media feeds were curiously quiet. Roman Reigns was nowhere to be seen. No interviews. No cryptic tweets. No sightings at training facilities or performance centers. It was as if he had vanished. For a man who once demanded every inch of the spotlight, who once orchestrated the Bloodline story like a grand maestro, Roman's silence was unnerving. Even his most loyal fans began to whisper. "Where is Roman Reigns?" Reports began to leak. First from anonymous sources in the locker room. Then from staffers in Stamford. Reigns had reportedly walked out of WrestleMania without addressing the media, without congratulating Jay, and, most shockingly, without saying a single word to Paul Heyman. It was confirmed that immediately after the match, Roman removed his gloves and belt, placed them on a folding chair in the locker room, and walked out of the arena in his street clothes. He didn't attend the post-show press conference. He didn't fly back with the rest of the roster. He disappeared. Internally, WWE scrambled. Writers began tearing up storyboards. Main event plans for SummerSlam were shelved. Merchandise launches were postponed. A scheduled promo package titled Roman's Redemption was cancelled hours before Raw went live. Even the Bloodline members were left in the dark. Jacob Fatu, still trying to establish his dominance, was reportedly visibly agitated during creative meetings. Zilla Fatu, according to one producer, sent Roman a string of messages that were all left unread. Solo Sikoa, already drifting into his own cold orbit, refused to comment when asked on-screen about Roman's whereabouts. His expression said it all, "Don't ask." The man who had orchestrated the Bloodline had become a ghost. But let's be clear. Roman's disappearance wasn't just about Paul Heyman's betrayal. That was the final blow, yes. But this storm had been brewing for over a year. Let's rewind the tape. The Bloodline had been under pressure for months. Jimmy and Jey Uso's implosion. Sami Zayn's rebellion. Solo Sikoa's increasingly unpredictable behavior. Each member had drifted in and out of loyalty. Each had flirted with defiance. And through it all, Reigns held on. Barely. He was the tribal chief, but more importantly, he was a man desperately trying to hold a family together. And when that family kept breaking, one piece at a time, the weight became unbearable. The cracks weren't just emotional. They were physical. Roman had been battling injuries in silence, nagging knee pain, reported neck strain, and what insiders called burnout levels of exhaustion. He never took time off, fearing that the empire would collapse in his absence. So when WrestleMania came and the one man he trusted, Heyman, abandoned him, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was permission. Permission to finally let go. And let go, he did. Roman Reigns retreated into total silence. He returned to his home in Pensacola, Florida. No cameras. No fan interactions. No PR events. For nearly 2 months, he refused all contact from WWE. Multiple top executives flew out to speak with him personally. He declined. Creative sent him new scripts. He never opened them. Triple H even made a personal appeal, offering Roman full creative control of his return storyline, an offer almost unheard of in WWE. Roman responded with just 2 words, "Not yet." But here's where the story twists again. Because silence, for a man like Roman Reigns, is not surrender. It's evolution. Behind the scenes, Roman wasn't idle. He was watching. Studying. Planning. Every Raw. Every SmackDown. Every backstage segment. Every subtle betrayal. He watched Paul Heyman speak in code on screen. He studied Tala Tonga's escalating presence in Japan. He took notes. He wasn't retreating. He was preparing. Sources close to Roman say he began training harder than ever. One trainer in Florida said, "It was like he wasn't just getting in shape. He was sharpening a sword." His workouts weren't about showmanship anymore. They were tactical. Brutal. Focused. He refused media interviews but gave one chilling comment to a fan who spotted him at a local gym. "Don't believe everything you hear about me. I'm not gone. I'm watching." That same night, WWE's internal Slack lit up. Roman had reactivated his communication channels with creative. The Chief wasn't gone. He was waiting for the right moment to return. But just as Roman was finding his clarity, Paul Heyman was accelerating his chaos. Unbeknownst to many, Heyman had been planting seeds across both Raw and SmackDown. Whispering in ears. Recruiting silently. He knew Roman would return. And he wanted to be ready. The centerpiece of that preparation? Tala Tonga. For weeks, Heyman made cryptic references to a new beginning. He hinted that the table was never Roman's to begin with. That the next era wouldn't be built with blood, but with fire. Fans dismissed it as typical Heyman hype. But Roman didn't. Because he knew Paul better than anyone. He recognized the look in his eyes. The cadence in his voice. The venom in his words. Heyman wasn't rebuilding. He was declaring war. The plan had been in motion for months. Tala Tonga, fresh out of Japan, had reportedly been offered multiple contracts, including AEW, and JPW returns, and even a private deal from a Saudi-based wrestling league. He rejected them all. Not for money. For purpose. Heyman gave him that purpose. To dismantle the empire Roman Reigns built. So when the announcement came that Roman would appear at Raw for the first time in 90 days, the WWE universe exploded. Speculation ran wild. Would he speak? Would he challenge Solo? Would he reunite the bloodline? No one expected what happened next. Not the fans. Not the roster. Not even Roman himself. Because when he arrived at the arena, calm, composed, in all black, he wasn't prepared for what he saw on the monitor in his private locker room. Paul Heyman. And standing next to him, Tala Tonga. The name Tala Tonga didn't come with fireworks or fanfare. It didn't need to. Because when violence walks into a room, it doesn't introduce itself, it makes people quiet. To the average WWE viewer, Tala Tonga might seem like just another new face, a fresh name added to the roster. But to those who know the truth, to those who've watched wrestling beyond the polished lights of Monday Night Raw, Tala Tonga is not new. He is feared. He is studied. And he is absolutely lethal. He's the kind of man who doesn't yell for attention, because his silence speaks louder than anyone's entrance music. The kind of man who doesn't demand respect, because it's already been earned, in blood. But to understand why Tala Tonga's arrival has fractured the very foundation of WWE's tribal war, you need to understand what forged him. Because Tala wasn't built in Stamford. He wasn't sculpted in the Performance Center. He was born in chaos, sharpened in exile, and returned to collect on a legacy that was never given to him, but stolen. And now? Now, he's here to take it all back. Born into one of wrestling's most quietly respected dynasties, Tala Tonga is no stranger to lineage, legacy, or loyalty. His father was a decorated enforcer in his own right, feared in Japanese promotions for his devastating power and iron discipline. But unlike his cousins in WWE, Roman, Solo, the Usos, Tala didn't inherit opportunity. He was forgotten. While the spotlight fell on Florida gyms and WWE tryouts, Tala took a different path. He went to Japan. Not for glamour. Not for gold. For war. And war is exactly what he found. In New Japan Pro Wrestling, Tala Tonga forged a name few dared to pronounce without reverence. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't marketable. But when the bell rang, he made bodies crumble and crowds gasp. They called him the silent executioner. He didn't need catchphrases. His style was stiff, punishing, and precise, like a sledgehammer with surgical aim. Wrestling critics dubbed his matches borderline violence. He was respected in the locker room not for who he was, but for what he survived. Because in Japan, there is no room for ego. Only warriors. And Tala thrived. But even while he carved his name into Tokyo's darkest rings, there was a hole, something he never spoke about publicly. Something that festered behind his stoic eyes. Why wasn't he chosen? Why did the WWE bloodline form without him? Why was he never called? Never considered? Back home, Roman Reigns was building an empire with Heyman. The Usos were draped in gold. Solo was rising. Zilla was debuting. And Tala? Tala was alone. They all shared the same bloodline. But Tala wasn't at the table. He was watching from the shadows, discarded by a family that never saw him coming. Until now. In interviews, when asked about WWE, Tala always answered the same way. I go where the fight is. But it was more than that. It was personal. It always had been. Backstage sources and NJPW say that even during his championship runs, Tala kept photos of the WWE Anoa'i family taped inside his locker, not out of admiration, but to remind himself. To remind himself who forgot him. To remind himself what he was owed. That hunger, the chip on his shoulder, never went away. And as Paul Heyman began quietly rebuilding after WrestleMania, he saw something in Tala that he hadn't seen in Roman in years. Rage without ego. Heyman saw the storm. And this time, he didn't want to calm it. He wanted to weaponize it. So who exactly is Tala Tonga inside the ring? Imagine if Samoa Joe had never slowed down. If Minoru Suzuki had been 30 pounds heavier. If Roman Reigns had grown up without the spotlight, the protection, or the privilege. That's Tala. His finishing maneuver, a brutal double knee facebreaker followed by a reverse elbow to the throat, doesn't have a marketable name. He just calls it the ending. And that's what it feels like when he hits it. When Tala fights, he doesn't sell. He doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate. He walks away before the ref can even raise his hand. Because for him, the match isn't the performance. It's the message. And now, that message is aimed directly at Roman Reigns. According to insiders, Tala's WWE contract was negotiated entirely in silence. No public negotiations. No NXT teases. No fanfare. He didn't even speak at the signing table. He just looked at Paul Heyman, nodded once, and signed the deal. The only thing he requested? That his debut take place on the night of Roman's return. He didn't want a build-up. He didn't want a teaser. He wanted to show up. Stand next to Heyman. And look Roman in the eyes. That was his debut. And that was enough. But Tala's war isn't just against Roman. It's against what Roman represents. The bloodline, at its peak, was about loyalty, honor, tribal legacy. But Tala sees through that. He sees the politics. The favoritism. The performance of power. He's not